Hey CMA buddies, let's today continue with chapter 10.2 or rather module 10.2, and in module 10.2 we have already started with 5 basic structural types, and out of that we have already discussed 2 structural types. One is the functional one and the other one is multi-divisional. We'll continue with the third one, which is the matrix structure, right? Okay, how does a matrix structure looks like? You generally would find a CEO and there will be people below him who will be in operation, sales, finance and different departments, and thereafter you will have separate projects and which would be headed by the project manager, and these project manager would have the same kind of teams. So let's understand what exactly a matrix structure, how does it look like, and what is the basic definition of that. Combination of structures which could take form of product or geographical divisions. So the divisions can be either in the way of the product division or the geographical division. It can be functional and divisional structures. So it's a culmination of both the functional and multi-divisional, which I have already discussed. They basically operate in tandem. So they can be different structure which can be functional or divisional, and they basically work in tandem or operate in tandem. Tandem means either together or to be working simultaneously. So that's what is matrix structure all about. So matrix structure is basically a combination of structures which could take a form of what? Product and the geographical divisions. It can be functional and divisional structures, and they be operating in tandem or simultaneously. So what are the various advantages of having a matrix structure? First of all, it is effective in knowledge management. Why? Because it allows separate areas of knowledge to be integrated across organizational boundaries. So that means, say for example, there is one product division and one geographical division. So you would have people from different domains. So when they come together, there would be a good source of knowledge management. So that's what it talks about. Example can be in professional service organization, such structures help in applying particular knowledge specialism to different market or geographical segments. So you may come from different domains, as I already said, or different dimensions, and they can share their knowledge, and hence it can be a very useful tool as far as the knowledge management is concerned. Then it's pretty flexible. Why? Because since different dimensions of the organization can be mixed together, because there are people from varied fields and varied specialisms, they can come together, and that eventually can lead to a lot of flexibility. Attractive, especially in organizations operating globally, because of possible mix between local and global dimensions. So basically the MNCs, the multinational companies that are there, that's what it is discussing about. They basically can be very attractive because there can be a good blend of both local as well as the global knowledge specialist, or rather you can say the dimension. Fine. So first point is basically effective in knowledge management. Second thing is it talks about the flexibility, and third one can be firms can use the resources more efficiently, because there's a lot of product knowledge, different geographical dimensions, everything and anything. Hence you can use your resource more efficiently because of the vast experience that is available both globally as well as locally, right? And it provides professionals with broader range of responsibilities. So professionals basically have a broader range of responsibilities because they are mastering their skill sets, and hence they can be held accountable for whatever work they are doing. So these are the different advantages of matrix structure, but they also have certain disadvantages or cons. So what are they exactly? Let's have a look at that. Typically it takes longer to reach decisions because of bargaining between the managers of different dimensions, because people are set in different dimensions or different places or different geographical setups. There may be a difference of opinion, so that may lead to bit of bargaining issues, right? So it takes, or rather it can take a longer duration for reaching decisions, right? So decision making can be delayed. That's the first point. Then it may lead to conflict. Why? Because as staff find themselves responsible to managers from two structural dimensions, there may be people who may be reporting to the global company also, and the local manufacturing concern also. So in that case what can happen is there may be a conflict, because globally they may be saying something whereas locally the demands may be something else. So that can lead to a lot of conflict, and hence the staff can be in a catch-22 situation. It is also hard to control because their geography is pretty wide, hence control can be an issue. Then excessive reliance of group processes and teamwork, right? Because they are working across, so there may be a lot of reliance on group processes and teamwork. So if there is some kind of a lag in any of the processes or the teamwork, that can take a hit on the performance of the organization, and it may erode timely decision making, because you need to obtain various consent from different dimensions that can basically delay the decision making process. So that's what it talks about, right? So let's understand, or rather let's have a look at the figure that can give you the key points as to what are the advantages and disadvantages of matrix structure are. Advantages is basically efficient use of resources. Then there is a flexible structure, and there can be effective knowledge management. But the disadvantages can be, there can be control challenges, there is a potential for conflict, and it is hard to control, as we have already discussed, and there may be decision making delays. So these are the various disadvantages of the matrix structure, right? Let's move on to the fourth one, and the fourth one talks about what? The transnational structure. Okay, transnational, trans means across different nationalities, so that's what is transnational, right? Organization that operates across national borders. Fine. So basically operating from different countries, you can basically say as transnational structure. So organization that operates across means from different parts, national borders, is basically called as a transnational structure. It balances global integration with the local responsiveness. It's a blend of both. What? The global integration, that the global players or the global headquarters, you may say, may be there, and the local company that is working. Best example can that be of, say, Apple. Apple basically is a global player, which is very which has the central headquarters where in US, but they have started, or they intend to start manufacturing in India also. So in that case, that becomes a transnational structure, right? So you have a global integration of Apple along with the local responsiveness, because a lot of people in India are crazy about Apple phones. So hence Apple has decided to start a manufacturing plant in India also. So that can be a perfect example of transnational. This structure involves a central headquarters coordinating local subsidiaries or branches in various countries. I hope you understand. Keep the Apple example, or any of the IT companies you can take an example of. For example, you can say Hewlett Packard. Hewlett Packard is a very big company, so they are operating here. Similarly, you can have other audit firms like Ernst and Young. So they have the central headquarters in their own country, whereas they have a branch or subsidiary working in India. So that's what is a transnational all about. These subsidiaries often adapt their products, services and marketing to suit the specific needs of the local markets while adhering to the overall global strategy. So their idea is basically wherein the local subsidiaries are basically able to adapt to the product, services and the marketing techniques to suit the local needs, but they have to keep in mind the overall global strategy also. So that's what this all talks about. So what are the various features? The features is, first of all, there are two features primarily. The first feature says it responds specifically to the challenge of internationalism. So if you have to diversify, because in today's world, if you are very local centric, then in that case, the scope of growth becomes very limited. So your idea, if you have to expand your company, then you have to go to different markets, and different markets globally, right? Not the local markets itself, but the international markets also. So if you have a concept of transnational structure, it has a feature wherein it can respond specifically to the challenge of internationalism. Fine. It tends to have more fixed responsibilities within its cross-cutting dimensions. Cross-cutting simply means when joining two or more categories. So when you join the category of global as well as the local, in that case, that becomes a feature of the transnational structure. So it tends to have more fixed responsibilities within its cross-cutting dimensions, because you're working you're working with different players across the globe. In that case, that cross-cutting dimension thing comes into the picture, right? So first thing is, you need to respond specifically to the challenge of internationalism. You respond to the challenge of internationalism, that's the first point. And secondly, you have more fixed responsibilities within its cross-cutting dimensions. Cross-cutting means simply to join two or more categories. Fine. Then moving on, what are the various characteristics of the transnational structure? First of all, national unit operates independently but is a source of ideas and capabilities for the entire corporation, right? You may be working independently within your country, but you may be a source of ideas and capabilities for the entire corporations from the global paradigm, right? So that is what is one of the characteristic of transnational. Example can be in Unilever, or what we used to say Hindustan Lever before. In Unilever, the source for innovation in hair care products worldwide is in France. So if you talk about the hair care products which are being produced in Hindustan Unilever, you would find that most of these ideas or the source of innovation basically comes from France, right? Similarly, national units attain greater economies of scale through specialization on behalf of whole corporation or at least at the large regions, right? So there is a characteristic of the economies of scale. So basically you attain a greater economies of scale. Why? Because the specialization perspective comes into the picture, because you have specialization throughout the globe. So in that case the ideas come, and that basically can improvise on the performance of the business within the whole corporation or at least in the large regions. Corporate center manages global network. How? By establishing the role of each business unit. So corporate center, for example, we spoke about Apple. So Apple has a global center, corporate center in say Apple in US. So they would be able to establish the role of each business unit. Each business unit means every business unit that is working in different countries. So your center will be there in US, whereas you will have different subsidiaries, say in India, say in North Korea, say in Japan, say in China, say in some other country. So basically they will be there center, the epicenter rather, and they would be focusing or concentrating on the work of all the other subsidiaries. Therefore it focuses on sustaining the system. So how does it help? It basically helps you to sustain the systems, relationships and culture to make network of business units operate effectively. See, the eventual purpose of having an epicenter is basically they can keep a track of the various system or the system which is being on which they work. So there has to be uniformity, there can be a good relationship, and they can understand the work culture, and eventually the how that will help is that it will help you to operate effectively. A successful transnational corporation has the ability to achieve global competencies, local responsiveness and organization wide learning and innovation. So basic idea of a transnational corporation which is successful is basically to achieve what? Global competencies. So you would be able to compete with the your competitors well. You will have a good local responsiveness, and organization will have a good learning, and they would be inclined towards innovation. So that's what is another characteristic. Then global business managers carry the responsibility to further the company's global competitiveness across the national and functional boundaries. So how does it help is even the global managers are benefited through the responsibility, because they are able to carry the company's global competitiveness across the national and the functional boundaries. But there are certain criteria they should carry. What are they? They must be product or market strategist. They should be able to understand the local and the global product, and they should be such kind of market. They should be an efficient market strategist rather. They should be the architect of business resources and competencies, driver of product innovation, coordinator of transnational transactions. So 5 things you need to remember if you need to remember the point of global business managers. What are the skill sets they should be able to carry? They should be good product or market strategists. They should be architect of business resources and competencies. They should be driver of product innovation, and they should be coordinator of transnational transactions. Right? Moving on with the characteristics. The other characteristics are, first of all, country or area managers have a dual responsibility to other parts of transnational. What are the other responsibilities that a country or area managers have? They basically have dual responsibility or 2 responsibilities. First of all, they must analyze the local needs and inform them internationally for new products or services. Right? That's the first and foremost, because you're working within your domain or your own market. So you should be able to analyze what are the local needs, and that should be conveyed to the international headquarters for what? For the new products or services. Then they should seek to build competencies, become center of excellence that allows them to contribute to the company as a whole, example in manufacturing or R&D. So they should be a good contributor, especially in various departments like manufacturing and R&D, right? So they should be able to build such kind of competencies. Then other characteristics are functional managers, that is either in IT or finance. They should have a major responsibility for ensuring worldwide learning and innovation across the various parts of the organization. So whenever you are writing any kind of characteristics, please make sure this learning and innovation is a point which is repeated every now and then. So at least in transnational, that becomes of a very important relevance, or it becomes way too relevant. For this, they must recognize and spread best practices across the organization. So they should spread the best practices, and hence that would ensure that your transnational structures are basically successful in nature. Corporate managers integrate other roles and responsibilities. Why? Because they must foster the process of innovation and knowledge creation. Foster simply means to encourage. They are responsible for strong management center in the organization, right? So you basically have some 7-8 points. So even if you can remember 5 of them, that's more than sufficient. You can simply jot it down and that would make your job easier. So I've just summarized all these points, the characteristics in our diagram. First of all, when you talk about the functional managers basically they have to ensure learning and spread best practices. Then you talk about the global business managers, they basically enhance the global competitiveness. You talk about the corporate managers and they integrate the roles and foster innovation. Country or area managers, they analyze the local needs and build competencies. And the national units, they are basically the source of ideas and capabilities. So if you just summarize this diagram, that is more than sufficient for you to explain the transnational corporation structure, right? Moving on, what are the various disadvantages of transnational structure? First of all, it is demanding for managers in terms of willingness to work not just at their immediate responsibilities but for the good at the transnational as a whole. So they are not only responsible or they are not only accountable for their local performance, but their performance will eventually take a will have an impact on the global structure on a whole. So hence that becomes a bit of demanding feature for the managers. Then there are difficulties in coordination and communication across different locations, potential for conflict and tension between global and local priorities, the risk of over localization and difficulties in maintaining centralized control and brand consistencies. So there can be an issue of coordination and communication across different locations. There might be a conflict or tension between what global and the local priorities. There may be a difference of opinion. There may be a risk of over localization. That should not be there because they have to concentrate equally on their global brand as well, and there can be difficulty in maintaining centralized control and brand consistency. So what are the various pros and cons of transnational structure? First of all, when you talk about the pros, it should have a global reach, or rather it has a global reach. There is a diverse talent pool and there is innovation potential. Whereas when you talk about the cons, you will see they are not, managerial demands are very high, so it becomes a challenge for them. There is a coordination challenge, there may be conflict potential, there may be over localization risk, and there may be control issues, right? So with this we are done with transnational structure. Now we move on to the last one, which is the project based structure. Sorry. Okay, what exactly is a project based structure? This is a structure when teams are created, undertake the work and are then dissolved. Very simple. They just simply start, they work and they end. That's it. That's what is a project based structure. So it is not basically a recurring process. It's a very non-recurring process. So when there is a particular project, you work on them and that's it, and it is dissolved. That's what is a project based structure all about. It is appropriate for what? For organizations that deliver large and expensive goods or services, right? For example, when you do civil engineering or information systems or even filmmaking, right? This is all project based structure. And when we talk about or those delivering time limited events, so it can be conferences, sporting events or consulting engagement. Example, IPL, that's the best example of a project based structure. This structure is constantly changing collection of project teams created, steered and glued together loosely by a small corporate group. So it is basically handled by a small corporate group. Reason being the duration is not very long, so there is no question of having a large corporate group. So basically they are created, they are steered. Steered means they just carry on their work and they are glued together. That means they work in coordination with each other loosely, not very tightly but very loosely, as in till the project is there, so it's very loose in nature, and hence it is being managed by a very small corporate group. What are the various advantages of a project based structure? First of all, it is highly flexible with projects being set and dissolved as required. So you started, whenever it is done, you are done with it and you just finish it off. Then there is an accountability and controlled are defined as teams have clear tasks to achieve within a defined period. So your accountability and control are very defined. So basically you know what exactly you are doing. You already have specialists who knows what is their work. You just finish it off and you just wrap it off, right? Then it is effective as knowledge exchange. As project team members will typically be drawn from different departments within the firm. So again the knowledge sharing thing like the transnational structure comes into the picture, and projects can also draw member internationally. So you need not only hire local people, you can even draw the people internationally. Why? Because since the project length is relatively short, project teams may be willing to work temporarily around the world. So they may have the flexibility to go across the world and work. Fine. For example, simple thing can be that of a, say, cheerleaders. When you see an IPL, so they may be professional cheerleaders, but when it comes to the IPL in India, they may come here. Once it is done, they may be moving to, say, Australia for being a cheerleader in their own county crickets or the leagues that they play, right? So just for an example purpose, I'm telling you that, right? So these are the various advantages of your project based structure. Then what are the various disadvantages? First of all, without comprehensive strategic control, organizations are prone to expand projects in an ill coordinated fashion because it is for a very shorter time. So the strategic control is relatively lower, or it's not comprehensive. So what it can do is that they may be prone to expand the projects in an ill coordinated, so there may not be a balance, right? Similarly, you would see that constant breaking up of project teams can hinder accumulation of knowledge over time or within specialism. So again, you can simply say there may be a conflict, there may be a difference of opinion, and hence it can lead to the breaking of the projects, right? So these are the two different disadvantages, right? So what are the various advantages? First of all, there is a clear accountability and high flexibility, whereas when you talk about the disadvantages, there may be a hindered knowledge or a lack of coordination, right? Okay, now we come to the last part of the chapter, very important from the exam perspective, right? Okay, why it is important? Let's understand this. Structures of different types are mixed and have to be tailor-made to face mixed challenges faced by the organization. We did 5 kind of structures, right? Functional, multidivisional, project-based. Then we had what? Then we have transnational, and we had the matrix structure, right? Now there may be a situation wherein the particular kind of structure may not be ideal for the company. So hence the company may go for a tailor-made, which can be a mix of 2 or more kind of structures, right? Okay, 2 people, very important. One is Michael Gould and Andrew Campbell, right? What they did was they provided 9 design tests against which to check specific tailor-made structural solutions. So if you have to make a tailor-made solution, you basically have to have certain tests undertaken. So there are 9 kind of tests that has been undertaken by 2 people. Who are they? Michael Gould and Andrew Campbell, to create such kind of structural solutions. Now out of this, the first 4 tests stress fit with the key objectives and the constraints of the organization. So the first 4 are very important, because these stress fit, what they do is that they focus on the key objectives and the constraints. That means the what constraints can be something which is being lacked by the organization. So that basically concentrates on that, right? How do I remember this? There are 9, so it's likely that we may forget. How I remember is that is I am having a PPF account. So PPF, and for that I prepared a draft. Now instead of T I have S, so it is not draft, it is drafts, right? So how I remember is my PPF is prepared through a draft. So MPPF drafts. If you have a better way of remembering, please go ahead. But please remember, this MPPF are the first 4 ones. So you remember these within any order, but these first 4 are the ones which will talk about the key objectives and the constraints, right? Let's start with M. What is M? M basically is a market advantage test. Okay, what does it say? It says evaluating a company's strategy to ensure it is well positioned to gain a competitive edge in the chosen market. So its concentration is basically on the on gaining or to ensure a competitive advantage in the chosen market or a particular market. This mainly involves what? It involves assessing if the organization structure, resource allocation and management focus effectively support the chosen market strategy. So the concentration of the market advantage test or the stress test that it is conducted is basically to evaluate what? A company's strategies regarding what? The competitive edge or the competitive advantage it has in a particular market, right? Now this basically involves what should you do to ensure that you have that advantage? You should be able to assess the organization structure, resource allocation and your management focus effectively support the chosen market strategy. That's what it should concentrate on. Second one is what? Second one is parenting advantage test. Parenting basically to parent some or to guide, right? So basically that's how you can remember. So M, then you talk about PPF, the first P is parenting advantage test. What does this test talks about? It is a framework used to evaluate how well a parent company. So when I say parenting advantage test, my focus should be on the parent company or the corporate headquarters. Apple, please remember, can add value to its subsidiaries or business units. So how can a corporate headquarter or a parent company basically can add value to the subsidiary or a business unit? The third one is again P, that is first is M, that is market advantage. Second is what? P, which is parenting advantage. Third one is what? Again P, which is people test. Now this people test is what? It design must fit the people available. Very simple. Whatever design you are working in, that should be within the that should ensure that the people who are working in the organization are able to fit into that. Example can be, it is not ideal to switch completely from a functional structure to a multi-divisional structure. Why? Because as it is possible, the managers may lack competence in running decentralized business unit. So if you are working in a functional structure, you may be working in a centralized structure. But if you move to a multi-divisional structure, if you're aware, if you have not seen my last video, please do check that. In that, I've clearly explained that in a multi-divisional structure, you basically work in a decentralized business unit. So if you are migrating people from the functional to a multi-divisional structure, it is possible that the managers out there may not have the competence to run the multi-divisional structure, right? So that is a people test. So you should fit into it. If you're not a proper fit in that, then you should not be delegating or appointing that person in that particular structure, right? Then PPF. F is what? Feasibility test. What exactly is feasibility test? This test checks whether all constraints, right? Constraints, we discussed about that, the 4 constraints. I said key objectives and the constraints of the organization. The 4th one talks about the constraints. So this test basically checks whether all constraints are taken into account that impede. Impede means what? Delay something by obstructing something, right? Or hinder, that's the right word to use. So you can say this test basically checks whether all constraints are taken into account that impede the implementation of organization demand, right? So these constraints can be both. It can be either internal. Internal can be, for example, an IT department, or external, say the laws which are governing the company, right? So that's what should be kept a check on. So these are the constraints basically. Such constraints need to be identified and assessed early in any design effort. So basically this test is concerned with the constraints. So if I talk about constraint test, it is basically the feasibility test. Now what it can do is, it can basically hinder the implementation of organization demand. So if you don't conduct the feasibility test properly, then that can hinder the implementation of organization demand. Example can be 2 things you remember, one is internal and one is external. Internal can be IT and the external can be laws. If such constraints need to be identified, why? Because that should be able to improvise your performance, the company's performance, and if it is assessed early, it is good as far as any design effort goes. Fine. Okay, then I come to the last 5 drafts, DRAFS, right? So what is D? D is basically a difficult links test. What does it talks about? It says this test tests whether the design provide coordination solutions for the unit to unit links that are likely to be problematic. So basically it talks about the coordination between different units. So hence the definition explains it like whether the design provide coordination solutions for the unit to unit. Unit to unit means department to department or function to function that are likely to be problematic. Example can be extreme decentralization to profit accountable business units is likely to strain relationships with central research and development department. So if you basically decentralize, or you rather extremely decentralized everything, in that case there may be a conflict between the profit accountable business units, and they can have a strained relation with the R&D department. So that's what it talks about. It's basically an example. If you just simply explain them that the design that design provides the coordination solutions for unit to unit links that are likely to be problematic, that would define the difficult links test. Then you come to redundant hierarchy test. Drafts, DRAFS. We have already spoken about D. Now we'll talk about R. R is what? R is redundant. Redundant means doing the same thing again and again. So any structural design should be redundant. You can even say repetition also, but please use the right word as far as these 2 people have already defined it. So the redundant hierarchy test says any structural design should be checked whether it has too many layers of management, right? If there is too many layers, that can do what? It can cause undue blockages and expenses, right? So basically what you need to do, if there is too many layers, then you need to do the reverse of that. That is, you need to delayer it. Delayering in that case can be an effective remedy for overcoming the issues pertaining to this test, right? Then you come to the A part, that is accountability test. It stresses the importance of clear lines of accountability, which ensures what? The control and commitment of managers throughout the structure. Because of dual lines of reporting, matrix structures generally lack clear accountability. So out of all the 5 structures that we have read, the matrix structure is the one which basically lacks the accountability part, right? Then you come to the F. F talks about what? The flexibility test, right? The first one was feasibility test. Please don't confuse. That is a part of the key objectives and the constraint is primarily concentrated on the feasibility test. Now this F talks about the flexibility test. This says this test is important as it helps to understand the extent to which a design will allow the change in the future. Because it is flexible, flexibility is what? Basically your ability to change. So this test will help you to understand the extent to which the design that you're following, whether they will be allowed to be changed in future or not. Example can be, divisional domain should be specified broadly enough to allow divisional managers to follow new opportunities as they emerge. So basically when you pass through the flexibility test, that does means that your divisional managers are able to gauge the new opportunities as and when they come. Finally, you talk about the specialist. Please remember, it's a specialist cultures test. In your book, it is mentioned as specialized culture test, right? So you can write this as specialist culture test and make a note that in book it is mentioned as specialized. This test basically reflects the value of bringing together specialist, right? As the name says, specialist culture test. So it basically talks about the value of bringing specialists to the organization together so that they can develop their expertise in close collaboration with each other, right? So this is what is specialist culture test, right? So basically we have 9 structural tests which are very, very important for a tailor-made solution. Now how do you remember? You remember this by MPPF drafts, and the 2 people who have basically devised this techniques are Michael Gould and Andrew Campbell, right? So let's quickly have a look at what it is. We'll simply look at this diagram and it should be able to summarize the entire structure. So Gould and Campbell 9 design test for organizational structure is, first is what? M is where? M is market advantage test. So market advantage test says it concentrates on what? It concentrates on strategy alignment and resource allocation. Then you say PPF, right? What is PPF? First P is what? First PP is parenting advantage test. So that concentrates on what? Corporate headquarters is there and they basically give the standard procedures to the business units or they monitor the business units. Then there is PP, second P is people test. It is basically a functional structure and a multidivisional structure. Then it is basically F. F is what? This F is all about what? It is about the feasibility test, because the first 3 talks about the key objectives, the 4th one talks about the what? Constraints. So feasibility talks about the constraint. So there can be internal constraints. If you remember, we spoke about IT, and the external constraints, that is law. Fine. Then you come to drafts, right? What are the various drafts? First of all is difficult link test. This is the first D. It talks about the decentralization and central research and development. So if you remember, if there is a conflict between the profitable business and the R&D, so that's what it talks about. Then you say R is what? R is redundant hierarchy test. Basically there's a problem of layering. So how do you overcome this problem? By delayering and management blockages. Fine. Then you have what? AA talks about accountability test. You generally find it in the matrix structures, and this is a case of dual reporting. Then you come to F. F is flexibility test. It talks about the divisional domains and the new opportunities. And finally you come across the specialist cultures test. It is basically through expertise development and the collaboration, right? So with this we finished 10.2. Very soon I'll be coming up with a 10.3 chapter, or the module rather. If you like this video, please make sure you press the like button, do share with your friends, and do consider subscribing my channel. Thank you for joining and happy learning.